That crew, listen up. I know firsthand how limited a vessel's medical insurance can be. This is why you need reliable medical coverage. Moore Dixon offers comprehensive global insurance tailored for yachties, covering everything from emergencies to routine checkups with flexible options and a single point of contact. Moore Dixon has been voted Best Health and Medical Insurance by captains and crew, including myself. Don't wait until the unexpected happens. Get covered today. Visit mdbl.im or email them at inquiries@mdbl.im for a free quote. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Uncensored. I'm your host, Marién from Yachts Mermaids, and today we're kicking off episode 1 of a powerful 3-part conversation with maritime lawyer Adria Notari. In this episode, we are breaking down what the IMO, ILO, and MLC actually do and don't do when it comes to protecting seafarers. We also look at what rights still apply when a vessel is flagged to a country that hasn't ratified the MLC, like the US, and what protections crew have regardless of a vessel's flag, length, or type. If you ever wonder where you truly stand when it comes to your rights at sea, this is the episode for you. Let's get into it. So today we are joined by Adria Notari, a U.S. maritime attorney based in South Florida with deep roots in the industry. She is a graduate of the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, a former international ship captain and naval reserve lieutenant, and the former vice chair of the Florida Bar Admiralty Law Committee. So she's been on the front lines of maritime legal reform for over 15 years. And Adria brings a rare combination of seafaring and legal experience. She uses her expertise to advocate for injured, mistreated, and assaulted crew and passengers at sea. So tune in as we explore the rights seafarers do have, what legal protections exist, and how to take action when those rights are violated. Welcome to the show, Adria. I am so happy to have you in this conversation today.
Thank you so much, Marién, for that lovely introduction. Big fan of your work.
Thank you. So I know we don't have a lot of time and we want to cover a lot, so I'm just going to get into it. So the first thing I want to talk with you is about legal rights and differences. And I want to start with this whole IMO, ILO, MLC. And for those who don't know, IMO, International Maritime Organization, ILO, International Labor Organization, and the MLC, Maritime Labor Organization. And I want to start with this because these are the organizations that seafarers believe are there to support them legally and protect them legally. But are they really legal entities? Do they really protect? And in cases of abuse, injury, contract violations, and repatriation, what is the legal, how do they protect us legally? Or do they even protect us legally?
That's a great question. And we could spend hours talking about the origin of these different organizations. But as far as seafarers are concerned, these, I would say the shortcut answer would be that these organizations provide guidelines. So they provide safety guidelines. The IMO provides guidelines for safety of life at sea. How many life jackets, lifeboats, life raft, what kind of safety gear and equipment different vessels have to have. The ILO, International Labor, talks about labor standards. But most relevant to yacht crew, I would say, is recently, the MLC 2006 came into effect, and that was enacted by ILO. But again, MLC, these are guidelines. So the MLC sets forth minimum hours of rest, for example. The crew member can't work more than a certain amount of hours per day. And safety requirements that even for not just the firefighting and life-saving, but the accommodations that crew members should have, and so things like that. These are all guidelines, but the different flag states, because we know that yachts and ships and have different flag states. They're registered in these different flag states. So the flag states are the ones that are supposed to enforce these guidelines. So that's how it works. It's you won't see a seafarer calling the ILO or the IMO and saying, hey, I want to make a claim against my employer. Can you file the claim for me? Can I make a claim with the IMO? It doesn't work like that.
Copy. And thank you for making that very clear, because I think in the industry, there's a lot of confusion around that. And a lot of people believe that the guidelines that these entities, organizations have created are the law, which I'm assuming from what I heard from you, these are just guidelines that other entities, in this case, flags of convenience, flag states, should be following. But none of this is law, right? This is not like an international law thing that everybody, like if they don't follow it, are they actually breaking law? Or they're just not following a moral responsibility, social responsibility guideline?
It's a guideline for the maritime industry, but there are also legal implications for it. So depending on either the flag state where the vessel is, or if a vessel travels to a country where a certain regulation is in effect, then those guidelines do have the effect of law. And for example, if a vessel is in violation of either an MLC requirement or an IMO requirement, that can be used as evidence of not complying with the law, evidence of negligence, and so on and so forth. So it's not just a fictitious guideline. It is a real guideline. Vessels do have to follow these different guidelines, but I'm talking about for seafarers, like, I want to make a claim against the ILO. It doesn't work like that.
Right. Okay. And, now that we brought in the whole flag state, I do have a question because, for example, talking about the flag states that are rectified by the MLC, because obviously there's some that are not, like the US, and we'll talk about that later. But for example, I just had a seafarer said to me, hey, my pages haven't been paid. And I reached out to the flag state, and the flag state said, sorry, we don't, your vessel is a yacht and it's private pleasure, so we can't do anything about it. So I'm kind of confused on where does these guidelines that the ILO and MLC and IMO have created, where do they actually, how and when do they actually support us, the private industry? Because it's just so confusing, like you think that there's these guidelines, you look at the flag state of convenience, what they have rectified and what they have said yes to in the guidelines. And then when you do make a complaint or a report, I would say, then they come back and like, well, yes, but not because you're private. So I'm like, okay, so we have no rights because we're a private vessel, even though I'm an employee of an employer. This is a business. I'm working, right?
Yes. So you've again brought up a lot of different issues, a lot of moving parts. And one thing that I want to make clear is that when I talk about seafarer, I'm talking about person who works on vessels. It doesn't matter if it's a yacht or a cargo ship or a cruise ship. I'm talking about seafarer. That's a person who's employed on a vessel. Okay, so it doesn't matter. I don't want to distinguish between yacht crew and the cruise ship crew or cargo ship crew or merchant navy. They're all seafarers under the maritime law. And then I'll also speak about, because I'm licensed to practice law in the United States. So I don't know how it works in other countries, but in the United States, the Coast Guard is the flag state enforcer. So if there's a vessel that's not complying with some regulation, you can make a complaint to the Coast Guard. I find it discouraging that some yacht crew are telling you that they're not getting any response from the flag state. So in situations like that, if a crew member is not getting paid their wages on time, they need to contact an attorney, because one of the things, even without the the advent of the MLC, a seafarer is entitled to his or her crew wages. That's that's a fundamental right. That also creates a legal cause of action, and it also creates a maritime lien if the situation leads to that. So, if you're a crew member working on a yacht or any type of vessel, a tug, a workboat, you name it, you're entitled to your wages in a timely fashion. And if you're not getting paid and you're not getting any support or even recommendations or feedback from the flag state, you need to contact a maritime attorney. And people can contact me. The initial consultation is free.
We talked about some flag states being rectified by the MLC, US not being one of them. How does those who are not rectified by MLC, do they have to follow MLC guidelines, or that just goes completely out of the window when it comes to these countries that are not part of the MLC convention?
In general, again, I don't want to give any specific advice for a specific case, but in general, the MLC guidelines are, like, for example, in the United States, there are seafarers' rights and guidelines about, like, a seafarer is entitled to a reasonably safe workplace. A seafarer should be paid their wages on time. If a seafarer is injured, he or she is entitled to medical care, regardless of fault, regardless of if the vessel owner is negligent or if the crew member is they're entitled to medical care. So all of these things are already part of the United States general maritime law and United States federal law, like the Jones Act. So some of those things overlap sometimes with what the MLC requirements are. So I don't think yacht crew members should get discouraged and say, oh, well, I work for a vessel that flies the flag of a country that hasn't ratified the MLC yet. That doesn't mean that the crew member doesn't have rights. There are a lot of rights that are incorporated under the general maritime law or the traditional maritime law of whatever country that flag is. So that's part of the answer. Another part of the answer is that if a vessel is, let's say a vessel has a U.S. flag, and you've properly pointed out that the United States has not ratified the Maritime Labor Convention yet. So if a vessel, let's say a sailing vessel, or no, a yacht, let's say a yacht has a U.S. flag, but the yacht travels to a port in a country that has ratified the Maritime Labor Convention, then that yacht still has to adopt and follow the Maritime Labor Convention guidelines. It's not like, oh, they can just violate it because they've got a U.S. flag. It doesn't work like that. So because yachting and just maritime commerce in general is so international, you can have an owner based in one country, crew members from a totally different country. The flag of the vessel is another totally different country. So and then the vessel itself is moving to so many different countries. So all of these things have to be considered at the same time. So you look at the totality of the circumstances and you see, well, what kind of law will apply to that specific situation? What are the seafarers' rights in that situation? Does this apply? Does that apply? Is this enforceable? Is this not enforceable? But I certainly wouldn't get discouraged and say, oh, darn, my vessel has a flag that hasn't adopted or ratified the Maritime Labor Convention yet. That's not always the case.
Thank you for that clarity, because, when it comes to maritime law, nothing is black and white. Everything is there's so many shades to it. And this is why having conversations like this are really eye-opening and just helps us, the seafarers, understand, okay, if something does happen, it's not just the flag state. There's so many other components that need to be brought in together. And that's why looking for an expert, in maritime law is so important. So what are the legal rights that seafarers have, regardless of tonnage, flag state, vessel type, meaning private or commercial, or crew nationality? Like, is there any basic guide of these are basic rights that everybody, no matter what, have, or that's not how it works?
No, there are absolutely basic rights that these are seafarers' rights, regardless of vessel tonnage or certainly the nationality of the seafarer. That doesn't matter. Every crew member is entitled to a reasonably safe workplace. That's yacht safety. That's vessel safety. That's a reasonably safe workplace. Does it have
Can I ask a question about the safety?
Sure.
Does that include psychological safety and like a place where there's no bullying, harassment, assault, like all that stuff? Is that part of it, or just the environment that is not, the person, the individual?
No, great point. No, it's both. It's both. So as a crew member, yacht crew, or any type of vessel, as a crew member on a vessel, you're entitled to a reasonably safe workplace. So that means like the vessel's gear and equipment has to be in pretty good shape. It can't be in disrepair. It has to be fit for whatever the purpose is. If it's a ladder, it has to be fit for you to go up and down that ladder, and so on and so forth. But you're also entitled to a workplace to be free of sexual assault and sexual harassment, and free from bullying or discrimination, and things like, and physical assault. Absolutely. And the reasonable safety also goes to like the crew. If there's a dangerous crew member on board, well, that crew member should not be on board, because that crew member is messing up that reasonably safe workplace that all the crew members are entitled to. You see what I mean? So as a crew member, you're entitled to a seaworthy vessel. A vessel can be seaworthy, or vessel can be unseaworthy, as we said, the equipment, but it could also be unseaworthy because there aren't enough crew members, So the vessel is like short-staffed, undermanned. I don't like to say undermanned. It's a very sexist term, but, so the vessel doesn't have enough crew members for the mission of the vessel. And then, so what happens? Everybody is working longer hours. They're not getting adequate hours of rest. The vessel is short-staffed, and people are tired, exhausted, and also in a hurry. And that combination of factors renders the vessel unsafe. It leads to incidents. We read about it all the time. So first and foremost, every crew member is entitled to a reasonably safe workplace. They are also entitled to room and board. You're living on the vessel. The vessel has to be habitable. It doesn't have to be a 5-star hotel, but it has to be a habitable environment for the crew member to live in. And you're entitled to, room and board. So that means also, your adequate food, 3 meals per day. And you're also entitled to medical care and treatment. So that's very important. Crew members are entitled to medical care if they're injured during their contract, if they're injured during their service to the vessel. And it doesn't matter if the crew member was negligent, or if the owner of the vessel was negligent, or if the employer was not negligent. None of that matters. If you're a crew member and you're injured during your employment contract, you're entitled to medical care. No questions asked. It's an automatic duty. That's extremely important. It could. You're even entitled to medical care. Suppose something happens while you're on shore leave. So the injury doesn't even have to happen while you're on duty.
But not everybody, and I believe by law, they don't have to give you medical insurance, apart from just having the emergency insurance there. And then it doesn't seem like there's a disability insurance on board either, because I hear often how many crew members, something happens, they just, lose their job, and then they have like all these bills and they can't work because obviously they're disabled, for whatever reason. Accident happened on board or wherever. So how does that work with the legal rights of the crew member?
Well, depending on the employer, that's why it's very important to know, like so you get your first job on a yacht. Oh, you're so excited. This is going to be cool. This is going to be awesome. And well, like, oh, I work on that boat, the motor yacht, whatever. Who's the owner of this vessel? Who is your employer? Because these these responsibilities, these duties under the maritime law are charged to the employer. Who's the employer of the vessel? So as a crew member, I'm entitled to medical care and all of these benefits from my employer. So if I'm working on a yacht, I better make sure I know who is the employer in case, hopefully nothing will happen. But if something does happen, who's my employer? Who am I going to make a claim towards? So there are some employers that have seafarers employment agreements and also like disability benefits or a schedule of, if the injury is so disabling, so debilitating that the crew member can't continue to work as a seafarer anymore because they won't be found fit for duty, they won't be able to pass a medical exam anymore. And sometimes there's a schedule that says these are X amount of benefits, X amount of dollars per year or whatever, depending on the percentage of the disability rating, after a doctor's. But every employer is different. So that's why you've got to know, well, who am I working for here? Yeah, I'm working on that vessel, but who's the employer? But even if there is no disability benefit or disability schedule like that, if the injury is so debilitating and so disabling that the crew member can no longer be found fit for duty to work on shipboard life or yacht crew life, then you can file a claim. You can file a legal claim, and you can claim like your lost wages. If I hadn't been injured in this incident, I'd still be working as a yacht crew member for X amount of years. I was making so much money per month, but now because of my injury, I'm no longer earning that money. So I can make a claim for that compensation of what I would have earned if I hadn't been injured. That's just one example of different seafarers' remedies. But even if it's not a disabling injury, even if it's what some people call a minor injury, so the crew member is injured and we don't expect that's going to be a disabling injury, the crew member is going to be able to heal and reach maximum medical improvement and then go back to work. The employer still has to provide the medical care, the therapy, the medicine, and everything that the crew member needs until they reach that level of maximum improvement. And then if they can go back to work, then that's wonderful. That's the best scenario possible under those circumstances.
So we're going to talk more about contracts and jurisdiction, because we can talk about like this forever. But I do want to ask you, are there any legal differences in protections between commercial vessels, private pleasure vessels, also depending on their tonnage? Because we hear a lot, well, if it's under 500 ton, all this doesn't apply. If it's over 500 ton, then this apply. And we hear this from flag states. We see that there's a massive gap in those under 500 ton vessels where a lot of the unlawful things tend to happen. Because it's almost like, well, we're under 500, we're not commercial, so all that does not apply.
Oh, that is not the law. So if you're employed on a vessel under 500 gross tons, and you're employed as a seafarer, all of these rights and benefits and owner responsibilities under the maritime law still apply. You're working on a vessel. If you are employed on that vessel, you are entitled to those rights as a seafarer. If you're a passenger, let's say because you mentioned pleasure vessels. So if you mean suppose a friend of mine has a vessel, so they're not running a business, they're not running a charter business or anything like that. And again, heaven forbid, if someone is injured on that vessel, of course the person still has rights. They might not be a seafarer. It depends on what their role was. Maybe they're classified as a passenger, depending on what they're doing. But this is a misconception that the MLC and these guidelines don't apply to vessels under 500 gross. First of all, it's wrong. The MLC does apply to vessels under 500 gross tons. I think the distinction is that if you're under 500 gross tons, then the yacht doesn't need to have some MLC certification, but the requirements and the guidelines still apply. So a flag state inspector could still board a vessel that's under 500 gross tons and say, hey, you're not complying with the MLC. Where are, I don't know, where are the crew contracts, or where's this, or where's that, or where are the logs of rest hours, or whatever the case may be. And those guidelines do still apply. But most importantly, the legal rights and responsibilities still attach. So, our interest today is for yacht crew. If you're a crew member on a yacht, you are getting paid to work on that yacht. Like you're not a passenger. You're working there to fulfill these yacht voyages. You are a seafarer entitled to certain rights, and the tonnage, doesn't matter.
How can people work with you? How can people contact you if they have questions, if they want your support?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. I think that's how I met you, actually. Mm-hmm. So big fan of LinkedIn. The name of my law firm is Notari Law. And so the website is notarilaw.com. My name is Adria Notari. So it's a unique name. There aren't a lot of Adria Notaris that I know. So I'm pretty easy to find on Google and on LinkedIn as well.
And all the links are down below the video, so you guys can just click away and follow her on LinkedIn. And obviously, if you need support, then reach out to Adria. Thank you so much. This has been an eye-opener for me, and I have done a lot of research throughout the years. So if this helped me, I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people out there to get clarity around, maritime law and our legal rights and what we can do about it. Because like you mentioned, we can do something about it. And it is not up to the seafarer to understand the law. That's why we have lawyers.
That's great. That's exactly what we want to hear. Information is power. So thank you so much for having me.
And remember, this conversation is just the beginning. In the next episode, we get into what happens when contracts are violated, when seafarers are wrongfully terminated, and how retaliation plays out in the legal system. So stay tuned, because you don't want to miss what's coming next. If you find today's discussion eye-opening and helpful, don't forget to subscribe and share. We would love to hear your thoughts on this topic, so reach out to us on social media via Yachting International Radio or Yachts Mermaids. Let's continue the conversation.